The machine gun was never meant to move quietly. It was heavy, awkward, and impossible to ignore. Every sound it made, the clink of metal parts, the drag of the sling, the dull scrape when it brushed against a rock or root, reminded everyone that stealth had its limits. Even when broken down and carried exactly as the manual described, it still carried a kind of presence that refused to disappear. Everyone in the squad always knew where the M60 was. They didn't have to see it, they could feel it. It was the heartbeat of their firepower, loud, obvious, and vital. Specialist Third Class Andrew Keller had been carrying it since dawn. The sling had already worn a raw groove into his shoulder, and each step sent the barrel knocking softly against his leg. The jungle was thick, humid, and closing in from every side. Every breath felt like drawing in warm water. Sweat rolled freely down his arms, gathering dust and streaking the worn fabric of his uniform. By mid-morning, the rain began, not a downpour, just the steady curtain that blurred distance and softened sound. Visibility shrank. Even the men a few meters ahead looked ghost-like through the layers of mist. The squad moved along a finger of high ground no wider than a narrow path, with steep slopes dropping away into tangled undergrowth on both sides. Below, the jungle turned into a wall of shadows. Movement became deliberate. Each step required checking footing, testing the ground before committing weight. The men avoided snapping branches, not just for noise discipline but to keep balance on the slick mud. The weight of their packs, radios, ammunition, and weapons tugged them downward with every step. The jungle wasn't just background, it was an active opponent. The vines caught on gear, the mud threatened to swallow boots, and insects never stopped their assault. The soldiers' focus narrowed to what was directly in front of them, yet every rustle and distant bird call pulled their attention outward again. Keller's squad leader, Staff Sergeant Ortega, led them in staggered intervals, 5 meters between men when possible, though the terrain rarely allowed it. It was standard procedure, close enough to communicate, spaced enough to avoid being taken out together. The point man scanned constantly, his eyes flicking between the trail and the dark recesses of the forest ahead. By noon, the rain had grown heavier. It soaked the fabric of their webbing, made metal slick, and filled the air with the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. The machine gun weighed more now, not because of the gun itself, but because everything clung to it: moisture, mud, foliage. Even the ammunition belt sagged from the dampness. Keller kept the weapon slung low, muzzle angled down to keep water from collecting in the barrel. His assistant gunner, Private Ellis, carried the spare barrel and ammo cans, keeping pace just behind. They didn't talk. There wasn't much to say. The first sign that something was wrong came not as sound, but as the sudden absence of it. Jungle noise was constant: insects, dripping rain, the occasional squawk of a bird. But now, for several seconds, everything seemed to pause. The squad noticed, heads lifted. Ortega froze, raising a hand. The line halted. No one spoke, the silence stretched. Then, in an instant, it broke. A short, sharp burst echoed from the right flank, the distinct ripping noise of automatic fire. The men dropped instinctively. Keller's knees hit the mud. The sound was distant but deliberate, and it carried the rhythm of a practiced hand. This wasn't a random burst, it was controlled. "Contact right," Ortega barked, his voice low but forceful. The squad scattered, moving toward what little cover the ridge offered. The terrain was against them: thin trees, shallow roots, no solid rocks or trenches. There was no good cover, only concealment. They spread out anyway, firing short bursts downslope to suppress. Keller rolled onto his stomach, pulling the M60 into position. His movements were automatic: open feed cover, check the belt, clear the chamber, confirm readiness. His pulse was quick but steady. The machine gun's purpose wasn't precision, it was dominance. Through the rain and undergrowth, visibility was poor. The enemy was invisible, firing from the thicker vegetation below the slope. The angles made it worse. Keller couldn't depress the gun far enough from his current position without firing into the mud. He scanned the slope, mind racing through options. The fire wasn't random, it was bracketing, adjusting. They were probing, not to wipe out the squad immediately, but to fix them in place. Classic jungle tactic: pin the enemy with fire, maneuver a flanking element, finish from the side or rear. Ortega knew it too. Keller could hear him shouting short, clipped commands between bursts of return fire. 2, hold left. Keller, get me eyes downslope. I need a better angle, Keller called back. Ortega's answer came without hesitation. Then move slow and low, we'll cover. Slow and low, the phrase was doctrine and survival. Keller flattened himself, pressing into the damp earth. The ground was slick enough that he could slide forward using his elbows and knees, dragging the M60 beside him. Each movement was deliberate, measured against the rhythm of the firefight. Behind him, the squad kept up a steady beat of rifle fire, not because they saw the enemy, but because they needed to keep their opponents guessing. Suppression worked both ways. Keller's progress was painfully slow. The vines snagged the bipod legs, the mud gripped the barrel, his hands were numb, slick with rain. He paused often, listening, counting bursts. Enemy fire came in short, efficient strings, disciplined and well-trained. That made them dangerous. As he crawled, the landscape revealed its shape in fragments, a fallen tree forming a half-shelter, a tangle of ferns concealing the slope's curve, a darker line that might be a streambed farther down. Each feature mattered, each could offer advantage or death. He reached a point where the ground leveled slightly, enough to give him a shallow firing lane through the foliage. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. He set the bipod, adjusted his stance, and checked the belt again. He could feel his own heartbeat now, heavy and steady, like the weight of the weapon in his hands. The squad's rifle fire continued behind him, steady but nervous. The enemy's response came in coordinated bursts, always from slightly different positions. They were shifting, trying to locate the machine gun, trying to fix its line of fire before moving in closer. Keller breathed slowly, scanning for any hint of movement, a muzzle flash, a shadow, a shape out of rhythm with the rest of the jungle. He found it, a faint glint behind a fallen log, maybe 20 meters downslope. Another flicker to the left, the reflection of rainwater running over a weapon's barrel, perhaps. Targets, but firing too soon could expose him. He waited, muscles coiled, every sense tuned to the rhythm of the fight. The rain masked sound but also blurred vision. Both sides were fighting ghosts. This was where training met instinct. Jungle combat wasn't about aggression, it was about patience, timing, and reading the ground like language. Behind him, Ortega called out to shift fire left. Someone fired a grenade launcher, the dull thump of the round echoing downslope, followed by a muffled crash. The enemy's fire faltered for a heartbeat, then returned. That pause was enough. Keller gripped the trigger. The M60 thundered to life. The M60 erupted, its voice cutting through the rain and jungle noise like thunder. The recoil thudded into Keller's shoulder, steady and rhythmic. He fired short, controlled bursts, not wild streams, but measured arcs that swept across the slope where he'd seen the glint of metal. Instantly, the fight changed. The enemy's return fire stuttered, hesitated, and broke into scattered bursts. The squad's rifles joined in again, now with direction and confidence. The sound of the machine gun wasn't just noise, it was authority. It carved out a space, told every man where the fight was and who held the initiative. "Good shooting, Keller," Ortega called, his voice barely audible over the roar. "Keep that lane." Keller adjusted his aim slightly left, tracing bursts across the darker patches of vegetation. Each trigger pull was a choice. 2 seconds too long and the barrel would overheat, too short and the pressure would drop. His assistant gunner, Ellis, crawled up beside him, laying a fresh belt across his arm. The wet links glistened under the gray light. "Belt coming up," Ellis shouted. Keller lifted the feed cover, swapped belts by feel, and kept firing. The M60 rattled, ejected brass tumbling down the slope and disappearing into the mud. The barrel smoked faintly where rain met heat. The rest of the squad began shifting positions, using the cover the gun created. Ortega directed 2 fire teams to angle right, edging along the ridge's slope to gain a better flank. Every movement was a risk. The jungle could hide them or betray them depending on luck and footing. Keller's job now was simple: keep the enemy's heads down. He swept the slope again, bursts overlapping slightly, forcing their opponents to keep low. Each line of fire was chosen to deny movement, not to kill but to dominate the ground itself. Suppression was a language and Keller spoke it fluently. Down the line, riflemen fired in rhythm with him, their shots stitching through gaps in the foliage. The entire squad moved like a single living thing now, coordinated, tense, aware of every sound. Enemy fire came again, but weaker. Their bursts were scattered and rushed, no longer the tight, confident volleys from before. Keller could sense they were adjusting, trying to find another angle. "They're shifting," Ortega shouted. "Keller, pivot left, Ellis, stay with him." Keller adjusted his position carefully, moving only inches at a time. The bipod legs dug into the mud, anchoring him as he changed direction. He paused between bursts, scanning through the rain for any hint of movement. Then he saw it, faint shapes sliding through the brush farther down, trying to use the terrain to creep around the right flank. Their movements were coordinated, slow, using cover efficiently. Whoever they were, they knew the ground. Keller fired a pair of quick bursts toward them. The jungle absorbed the sound, but he saw immediate reaction, figures dropping, shadows pausing. He'd bought time, but not much. "Ortega, they're flanking right, halfway down the slope," he called. "Copy that," came the reply. "Bravo team, shift right, Keller, keep them pinned." Keller recentered his sights and continued firing, alternating between short bursts and quick pauses to cool the barrel. The M60's sound filled the ridge again, echoing through layers of wet vegetation. Steam rose where rain struck the gun's hot metal. The jungle's humidity made everything harder: visibility, breathing, grip. His uniform clung to his arms and chest. His fingers were numb from the constant vibration of recoil. The smell of wet earth mixed with gun oil and smoke, thick and metallic. Through the haze, the fight began to turn. Ortega's voice came again, closer now, moving up the line. Left flanks pushing forward. Keep that gun talking, Keller. Keller didn't look up. He just adjusted, firing in steady intervals. Ellis stayed low beside him, feeding the next belt into place, counting rounds under his breath. The squad's left team advanced slowly, using the rhythm of Keller's fire to mask their movement. Each time the M60 roared, their footsteps disappeared into the noise. That coordination was the difference between survival and chaos, each man trusting the others to do their part. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. The rain never stopped. The sound of firing rose and fell like the tide. Then gradually the enemy's response weakened, fewer shots, longer pauses. It was impossible to tell if they were retreating or repositioning. Keller's barrel was glowing faintly beneath the shroud now. He switched it out quickly, Ellis handing him the spare. The metal hissed as droplets hit it, releasing brief bursts of steam. When the next silence came, it felt heavier, not the sharp quiet before another burst, but the deep stillness that meant the fight was slipping away. Ortega crawled up beside Keller, helmet streaked with mud, voice low. Hold fire, let's see what they do. Keller nodded, finger resting but not tensing on the trigger. The jungle crackled with small sounds, rain on leaves, water dripping from branches, the slow settling of disturbed ground. No movement, no voices. After a minute, Ortega raised a hand. Cease fire. The words cut through the tension like a knife. One by one, the rifles went silent. For a moment, nobody spoke. The men stayed low, eyes scanning the slope, waiting for the jungle to reveal whether it was truly over. The smell of burnt powder lingered in the air, blending with the damp. Then Ortega whispered, "They're pulling back." It wasn't a victory shout, just an observation, calm and practical. In this kind of fight, silence was survival. Keller stayed at his gun for another full minute, watching the slope, finger still near the trigger. Only when he was sure no movement remained did he finally ease back. The tension in his shoulders released all at once. Ellis exhaled beside him. "You think they'll try again?" "Not today," Keller said quietly. "They got what they wanted, a look at us. They'll be smarter next time." They both knew that was true. Engagements like this were often about testing, measuring response, timing, and strength. The next contact would come when least expected. The squad regrouped. Ortega checked positions, redistributed ammunition, and reassessed their perimeter. The ridge was slick, churned with footprints, torn leaves, and small craters where rounds had struck mud and bark. Keller looked back along the path he had crawled earlier, a clear track carved through wet foliage, marked by dragged lines where the M60 had followed him down. Under fire, he'd felt invisible. Now in stillness, it looked obvious, exposed. He knew that was the nature of the job. The gun never blended in. It was meant to stand out, to draw fire, to anchor the fight, to hold the line when everything else was uncertain. Ortega walked past, clapping a muddy hand on his shoulder. "Good work, Keller, you kept us in it." Keller nodded, saying nothing. The machine gun rested across his lap, heavy and silent again. The rain began to pick up, steady and patient, washing over metal and skin alike. All around them, the jungle came back to life, insects humming, birds calling cautiously, the steady drip of water from the canopy. The world moved on as it always did, indifferent to the fight that had just taken place beneath it. The squad settled in to wait for extraction orders. The enemy was gone, the ridge was theirs, and for the moment, just a moment, the gun could rest. In that silence, Keller found the smallest sense of peace, the kind that came not from triumph but from endurance. The M60 had spoken when it needed to. Now, once again, it was quiet. By late afternoon, the rain had thinned to a fine mist. The squad had made it back to their temporary camp, a cluster of ponchos stretched between trees, dug-in positions half filled with water, and the smell of smoke from damp firewood that refused to burn clean. The ridge was behind them now, swallowed again by fog and distance. The jungle gave no sign anything had happened there. Inside the main shelter, Staff Sergeant Ortega gathered the squad for debrief. His voice was low, measured, the kind of tone that carried over rain but didn't break the quiet. A small red-lensed flashlight hung from a branch above, casting weak light over the group. Keller sat on an ammo crate near the back, the M60 stripped down beside him for cleaning. His assistant, Ellis, worked in silence, feeding a cleaning rod through the barrel. The sound of metal sliding against metal was steady, almost soothing. The point man, Private Torres, sat cross-legged near the front, chewing on a piece of dried fruit from a ration pack. His uniform was streaked with mud and leaf stains, but his eyes stayed alert, fixed on Ortega. "All right," Ortega began. "We're going to run through what happened on that ridge step by step. I want this clear before we move tomorrow." He drew a rough outline in the dirt with the tip of his knife, a ridge line, a slope, a set of dots marking positions. "We were moving north along this high ground," he said, tracing the line. "Weather limited visibility, terrain forced a single file. About 0900 we hit contact, right side downslope. Enemy initiated with suppressive fire, likely from an element of 4 to 6. Tight bursts, good control." He looked up, scanning faces. "That tells me it wasn't militia, probably trained regulars." No one argued. They all knew what disciplined fire sounded like. "They tried to fix us," Ortega continued. "They didn't push hard. They wanted us stuck so a second team could move around the flank. We countered that because we had control of the high ground and because the gun did its job." He nodded toward Keller. "That M60 locked the slope down. Once it started talking, the enemy lost their angle. They couldn't press or climb without exposing themselves." Keller didn't respond right away. He was focused on the gun's feed tray, rubbing the carbon buildup with a piece of cloth. When he finally spoke, his tone was even. "They were good, though, controlled bursts, short intervals. They weren't panicking." Ellis nodded. "Yeah, and they were adjusting too. Every time we fired, they'd shift fire 10, maybe 15 meters, trying to find gaps." Ortega gestured with his knife. "That's what I thought too. They were testing, seeing how we reacted, how fast we could reposition. My guess is they wanted to map our response times before committing to something bigger." Torres leaned forward, voice quiet. "I caught sight of them before contact started, just a few shadows downslope. I didn't call it because it was too fast, thought it was birds or movement from wind." He paused, grimacing. "Should have said something." Ortega shook his head. "You did fine, you'd still be guessing. In that weather, half the jungle looks like it's moving." He jabbed his knife into the dirt again, drawing another line that curved around the ridge. Now what saved us was Keller's repositioning. If he'd stayed where he was, he would have been shooting into the ground. Moving downslope gave him a line of fire that broke their pattern. Keller looked up, his expression thoughtful. "It wasn't luck. The terrain forced them into a funnel. They couldn't see my angle until it was too late." Ellis glanced over, smirking faintly. "Yeah, well, next time you crawl off into the mud with that thing, maybe tell me first. Thought you were gone." The faintest ripple of laughter broke the tension, short but real. Even Ortega allowed a small grin before turning serious again. "They pulled back clean," he said. "No sound, no pursuit. That tells me they didn't lose much. We pushed them off balance, but they'll come back smarter." He sheathed the knife and folded his arms. "That's why we debrief like this. Every inch of ground, every sound, every mistake, we log it. The jungle doesn't forgive patterns." The squad nodded. Everyone in the room had seen what happened when routines turned predictable. The rain outside strengthened again, tapping against ponchos and metal gear. The red flashlight flickered once, then steadied. Keller finished reassembling the M60, sliding the bolt into place and locking the cover shut with a satisfying click. The gun gleamed faintly in the dim light, clean, silent, ready again. Ortega looked at it, then at him. "You ever think about trading that thing for something lighter?" Keller shook his head. "Not really, somebody's got to carry it." "Yeah," Ortega said quietly, "somebody does." For a long moment no one spoke. The only sounds were rain and the faint, rhythmic scraping of Ellis wiping down an ammo belt. Finally Ortega crouched, erasing the dirt map with one hand. "All right, get some rest. We move again at dawn. Different route, same discipline." The men broke off slowly, returning to their shelters. Torres lingered for a moment, speaking low to Keller and Ellis. "You two saved us out there," he said. "If you hadn't found that angle." Keller cut him off with a small shake of the head. "We all did what we had to, that's all it ever is." Torres nodded once, then disappeared into the mist. Keller and Ellis sat together for a few minutes longer, checking their gear by touch rather than sight. Outside, the jungle murmured again, alive, restless, unconcerned. "Think they'll come back tonight?" Ellis asked quietly. Keller looked out into the dark, listening to the steady fall of rain on canvas. "No," he said, "not tonight, but they'll be out there waiting." He reached over, patting the side of the M60 gently, almost like reassurance. "So will we." The light dimmed as the flashlight battery faded, and the jungle swallowed their voices. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the canopy. And for the moment, just the moment, the camp was still.